I don't know about you guys, but I don't like this guy. Vroom vroom, baby! Scarlet EX and Violet EX cards have been completely revealed. The very first set of the new Scarlet and Violet generation, with the return of Pokemon EX, the new terastalizing phenomenon, and all that fun stuff. A new beginning. I'd say it feels like a new year, but it's even more exciting than a new year because new blocks only come around every few years. I'd say it feels like Christmas, but again, Christmas happens every year. It's more like the World Cup, all right? More like the Olympics. Yeah, PokeBeach does a great job of explaining the Lowercase EX mechanic, originally introduced in Ruby and Sapphire in 2003. Pokemon Lowercase EX evolve naturally from their original evolutions, like this Stage 2 Ampharos EX right here. Capital EX, or uppercase Pokemon EX, as we saw during the Black and White and X and Y eras, they are basically giant basic Pokemon, or in the case of Mega Pokemon EX, giant Stage 1 Pokemon. So they don't evolve from, Flaffy or Mareep. They just are big basics like this Ampharos EX we see right here from Ancient Origins. The lowercase Pokemon EX that are going to be in Scarlet and Violet are going to be like the original lowercase Pokemon EX from the early 2000s, and they will evolve. And this is a change that I think is going to be a fundamental win for the future of the Pokemon trading card game. This is going to be fantastic. I think that Pokemon V, Pokemon V-Star, and Pokemon V-Max were generally not a very exciting mechanic. I'm not mad that we went there. When you're making a collectible trading card game, you have to try new things, and that's okay. I mean, change is just part of what keeps the game exciting, but I am thrilled to see the return of the original evolution mechanics with the multi-prize Pokemon. And so far, I'm really excited because the cards just seem well-balanced, and they seem like they're going to be a great step forward for the Pokemon TCG. Now, the Terastal phenomenon has also been revealed. We've got terastalized Gyarados EX and terastalized Arcanine EX, and much to everybody's confusion, the Terastal phenomenon has been reduced to a bench barrier effect. So the Arcanine EX and the Gyarados EX cannot be damaged by attacks while they're on the bench. That's what their terastalizing does. Now, maybe they decide to do more with the Terastal phenomenon going forward, but for now, this is what it is. And frankly, I'm okay with that because I don't want the Pokemon trading card game to be like hyped up and like really overpowered to the nth degree. I feel like the Sword and Shield era kind of did that. The end of the Sun and Moon era with Tag Team Pokemon GX were just way overpowered, in my opinion. Overpowered to the point where expanded format is almost unplayable because of how insanely broken everything is, from about Team Up through Silver Tempest, right? That block of cards is so much more powerful than anything ever released in the Pokemon trading card game that expanded format almost can't exist anymore. So I'm okay with a slight dial back in power and a more methodical and thought out approach to card design if it means that the power level of cards is going to settle and become more manageable long term. So I think that that's kind of a necessary step. I do hope that maybe they do a little bit more with terastalizing going forward. But hey, I'm just stoked that the multi-prize Pokemon are evolving from regular basics again. This is something that I'm so excited about that you can't really bum me out with how not exciting the Terastal phenomenon is. Why is it always Gardevoir? Gardevoir gets all the nice cards. Gardevoir EX has 310 hit points and is a stage 2 Pokemon. We just got the Curlia with the refinement ability. So that ability is so strong that it's seen play just for that ability. Now that Curlia evolves into one of the most powerful Pokemon EX we've ever seen, yeah, I think this line is going to be extremely successful. Gardevoir EX has the ability Psychic Embrace, which reads, as often as you like during your turn, you may attach a basic Psychic Energy from your discard pile to one of your Psychic Pokemon. If you do, put 2 damage counters on that Pokemon, and you can't use the ability if it would knock out that Pokemon with the 2 damage counters. Let me reiterate, as often as you like during your turn. So if you've got 10 Psychic Energy in your discard pile with just 1 Gardevoir EX, you can just plop all 10 of those energy into play. That's incredible. Now, obviously, you damage your own Pokemon when you use this ability, but the top end potential of being able to just dump 10 energy onto your board, I mean, the possibilities are quite literally endless, because as a Psychic type deck, you no longer have to worry about how am I going to get energy into play. Gardevoir, just 1 Gardevoir can put as many energy into play as you could possibly want. The one-man band, the one Pokemon engine, it's insane to think how much power comes from just one single Gardevoir EX. Gardevoir's attack, Miracle Force, for 2 Psychic and a colorless energy, does 190 damage and heals any special conditions on this Pokemon. It's a pretty solid attack. You're not going to be one-hit KOing a lot of things. You can one-hit KO some Pokemon EX, but you're going to be 2-hit KOing anything in the Pokemon TCG. So a nice, serviceable attack. The real boon of this card, though, is its Psychic Embrace ability, which I'm sure will be the backbone of countless decks in the years to come. Still has 30 hit points, but it evolves into the mighty Gyarados EX with a massive 300 HP on a stage 1 Pokemon that only gives up 2 prize cards. Pokemon V-Star all have about 270, 280 hit points. This is crazy. It's got 2 attacks. Its first attack, Waterfall, does 100 damage for 3 water energy. And then the Tyrannical Tail attack for 3 water and 2 colorless energy. 5 energy. Yeah, that's pretty fitting. Gyarados typically has pretty expensive attacks. Does 180 damage plus 180 more damage if your opponent's active Pokemon already has any damage counters on it. Now, Galarian Zigzagoon is rotating, but I did see that we are getting a new Halucha, which can place 1 damage counter on up to 2 of your opponent's bench Pokemon when you play it from your hand to the bench. So the damage can be easy enough to place. We are losing Scoop Up Net to rotation, But with stadiums like Gapejaw Bog, there are multiple different ways to place damage counters on your opponent's Pokemon. 360 damage. It's classic Gyarados. Why would you need to do 360 damage, especially if that Pokemon already has damage counters on it? So you're going to be over swinging by probably 60 damage on average. And you have to get 5 energy on this thing. And guess what? Frostmoth is also rotating out of standard. So not a lot of great ways to get energy onto this thing. I suppose you could pair it with the Pokemon Go Blastoise, which can accelerate up to 7 energy from your deck onto your board. It ends your turn, though. You could also pair it with Origin Form Palkia V-Star, which can get 3 water energy from your discard pile onto Gyarados, and then attach a double turbo energy, and you would be doing 340 damage with the double turbo, which I suppose is fine. This card is probably too expensive to be worth paying for, but it is pretty cool, gotta say. Here is the Halucha I was talking about earlier that could see play in combination with Gyarados EX. It's got the flying entry ability. When you play this Pokemon from your hand to your bench, you may choose 2 of your opponent's bench Pokemon and put 1 damage counter on each of them. Its attack does 70 damage for a fighting and 2 colorless energy. Fixing Math is pretty much always good in the Pokemon TCG. Galarian Zigzagoon saw a lot of play during its legality for its Headbutt Tantrum ability. We also saw Giratina from Lost Thunder see a lot of play during its time in standard formats with the Distortion Door ability, which allowed the Giratina to come back from the discard pile and place a damage counter on 2 of your opponent's bench Pokemon, just like Halucha. So I have high hopes for this Halucha, even without Scoop Up Net in standard format. Fixing Math is pretty much always good. Armarouge? Armirage? Armarogue? I don't know how to say this Pokemon's name. Armarogue has 130 HP and the ability Fire Alarm, which reads, as often as you like during your turn, you may move a fire energy attached to one of your benched Pokemon to your active Pokemon. Then its attack, Flame Cannon, for 2 fire and a colorless energy, does 90 damage, and your opponent's active Pokemon is now burned. If you watch the channel, then you know that I'm not the biggest fan of abilities that just move the location of your energy. I definitely prefer abilities that accelerate energy into play. Something that I've been known to say is, why don't you just put the energy where you wanted it in the first place the first time, right? Instead of having to move it with an ability. There are some cheeky combos that you can pull off, maybe with Cheryl using Armarogue to move fire energy off of the Pokemon that you want to heal. But let me ask you this. How much play does the Bronzong from Battle Styles see? It's a stage 1 Pokemon with the Metal Transfer ability that can move your metal energy in play anywhere you want. And that card has seen almost no play at all in standard format. So then why would a fire type version of that can only move energy from the bench to the active be better? It wouldn't. I understand that many people may like Armarogue, but this card is kind of just mid at best. Believa is a new Stage 2 Grass-type Pokemon with 150 hit points. It's got the ability Fill Oil. When you play this Pokemon from your hand to evolve one of your Pokemon during your turn, you may heal all damage from one of your Pokemon. And then its attack, Solar Beam for 2 grass and a colorless energy, does 150 damage. Now, in standard format, Pokemon can have upwards of 300 HP. So being able to completely heal one of those Pokemon could be very powerful. Up until this point, Stage 2 Pokemon that don't directly impact the consistency of your deck, like Inteleon, have not seen a lot of play. But I think that in the Scarlet and Violet era, we might see some more return to basics with evolution cards seeing more play. That's my hope anyways. And if that's the case, then we might see cards like our Believa be combined with powerful Pokemon EX to completely heal them with those kinds of tank and heal strategies. Now, in Gym Leader Challenge format, our Believa could completely heal one of your tanky grass Pokemon, like maybe Torterra. And then our Believa also has a nice 150 damage attack, which is super good in Gym Leader Challenge format, as 150 damage is going to be knocking out most threats. I love Torkel. Torkel's an awesome Pokemon. This Torkel has 130 hit points and the concentrated fire attack, which requires that you flip a coin for each fire energy attached to this Pokemon, and it does 80 damage times the number of heads. So if you have the Pokemon Go Charizard in play in Gym Leader Challenge format, and you have 3 fire energy on your Torkel, then you get to flip 6 coins, and you do 80 damage times the number of heads. So if you go 50-50 and you flip 3 heads out of the 6, then you're going to be doing 240 damage. So this Torkel is interesting. It's really good if you happen to have Pokemon Go Charizard in play. Without Pokemon Go Charizard, it's just kind of mid. But its damage potential when you have the energy doubled up is pretty insane. So I think it's a card worth considering in Gym Leader Challenge format. Magikarp, Uwumbo, Uwumbo, he, she, we, Wugtrio. Wugtrio has 90 HP and the Sea Tunneling attack for 3 colorless energy. You flip 3 coins for each heads. Discard the top 3 cards of your opponent's deck. That's crazy. All right. So what you're saying is a new mill strategy just dropped. I love this. If you play the supporter card Will, you can guarantee to get at least 1 heads with your flips. If you play Glimwood Tangle, you can try reflipping the coins if you don't like your flips. If you happen to flip 3 tails, you can try again. There are some other mill-friendly cards that you can pair this Wugtrio with in Gym Leader Challenge format to try and run your opponent out of resources. Wow. I was just trying to build a water mill deck in Gym Leader Challenge format the other day, and then all of a sudden, Wugtrio, just what we needed. This is fantastic. I'm really excited about that. The 3 energy cost is a little bit prohibitive in standard format, unfortunately. If it were just 2 colorless energy, I would think that maybe this could be a potential mill strategy in standard, but 3 colorless is pretty difficult to pull off. You're probably just better off playing Durant in standard formats. But in Gym Leader Challenge, Wugtrio has a welcome home in any water mill deck. I'm going to be honest with you. I don't really know who this Pokemon is. Dondozo is a basic Pokemon with 160 hit points. He's huge! A basic single prize Pokemon with 160 HP. That's nuts. It's got the Vent Wrath attack, which does 50 damage for each Tatsugiri in your discard pile. So in standard format, if you have 4 Tatsugiri in your discard pile, for just 1 double turbo energy, you can do 180 damage. That's pretty good. And 160 hit points on a single prize basic is definitely not too bad. So this Pokemon's kind of nuts. I dig it. Could be a single prize deck. Tatsugiri is also pretty cool. It's a basic Pokemon with the attack preparations for 1 water energy. You get to search your deck for up to 2 basic water energy and attach them to one of your basic Pokemon. This is pretty neat. So with Tatsugiri, you can accelerate energy onto your Dondozo, and then Dondozo does more damage for the amount of Tatsugiri in your discard pile. Tatsugiri could see play in Gym Leader Challenge as well, just because it accelerates 2 basic water energy from your deck to one of your basic Pokemon. So this could be a card that you play in any kind of water type Gym Leader Challenge deck. And honestly, this could be a card that you play in any kind of standard deck that wants to have water energy in play. Being able to accelerate 2 water energy from your deck to one of your basic Pokemon is just a pretty solid attack, honestly. So I really like this Tatsugiri. I feel like it's got potential as just a way to kick off the game and get energy into play. I'm not exactly sure that Tatsugiri Dondozo is going to be the best deck ever. Maybe. I'll give it a firm maybe in standard format, okay? How about that? A maybe. That's the best I'm giving it. Kilowattrel is a lightning type Pokemon with 120 HP. Its skill dive attack for 2 colorless energy does 50 damage to one of your opponent's Pokemon. And then Thunder Blast for a lightning and 2 colorless energy does 140 damage, and you discard a lightning energy from this Pokemon. This power level obviously doesn't cut it in standard format, but in Gym Leader Challenge format, Skill Dive is a nice little spread attack which jives with lightning strengths, spreading damage to your opponent's benched Pokemon, and then 140 damage with the drawback of discarding 1 lightning energy is pretty solid damage output. If you wanted to play this card in your lightning type Gym Leader Challenge deck to diversify your deck's weakness, that would be a pretty decent option for you, since it does have a minus 30 resistance to fighting and is weak to lightning, where most lightning type Pokemon are weak to fighting. So having another fighting resistant Pokemon in your lightning type Gym Leader Challenge deck could be cool, especially if you are expecting a bunch of fighting decks to show up at whatever event you're at. Now, Lucario. This card's power level is not strong enough for standard formats, but in Gym Leader Challenge formats, this is a nice, efficient attacker. There are a lot of really strong Stage 1 fighting type Pokemon that already see play in Gym Leader Challenge formats, and Lucario slides right into those low energy cost fighting decks with its Vengeful Knuckles attack. For 1 fighting energy, it does 30 damage plus 120 more damage if any of your fighting Pokemon were knocked out by damage from an attack during your opponent's last turn. So 150 damage as a revenge attack if one of your fighting Pokemon was knocked out. And in Gym Leader Challenge format, if you're playing a fighting type deck, then all of the Pokemon that are going to be getting knocked out are fighting type. So its revenge qualification will be paid for, and you'll be able to do 150 damage for just 1 fighting energy. With a strong energy, it's 170 damage with a muscle band, and a strong energy, you can get up to 190 damage. 130 HP is exactly where you want to be in Gym Leader Challenge format as well. It's kind of the average attacker HP threshold that you want to be at. And then Accelerating Stab for a fighting and 2 colorless energy does 120 damage. And this Pokemon cannot use Accelerating Stab during your next turn. I like that it's got a secondary attack because if you Revenge for 150 and your opponent doesn't knock out the Lucario, you're going to want something else to do the following turn. Accelerating Stab being accessible for just a double colorless attachment or a twin energy attachment after you use Vengeful Knuckles is pretty solid. I think that this Lucario is definitely a solid attacker in Gym Leader Challenge format. It's also not weak to grass, so having a diverse weakness in your fighting type deck can also be valuable. I like this card. It's good. This is why Kamiya is the GOAT. Crookedile doesn't have a lot of fantastic Pokemon cards, but this Crookedile is actually pretty decent in the context of Gym Leader Challenge. Unfortunately, not really powerful enough to compete in standard format, but in Gym Leader Challenge, where Pokemon with a rule box are not legal for play, 170 HP and the ability to do 180 damage for just 2 fighting energy is quite good. Voracious Bite for 1 fighting energy does 50 damage, and you flip a coin until you get tails. For each heads, discard an energy attached to your opponent's active Pokemon. And then everybody's favorite fighting type Pokemon attack, Earthquake for 2 fighting energy, does 180 damage and 30 damage to each of your benched Pokemon. There are a lot of really great Earthquakers in the fighting type pool of cards. 180 damage for 2 fightings, just great damage output in Gym Leader Challenge format. Of course, getting a stage 2 Pokemon into play is not always the easiest thing to do, but with cards like Karina, you can just search out Rare Candy and Crookedile with a single supporter card, allowing you to easily spring that Crookedile into play. And dealing 30 damage to each of your benched Pokemon can actually be a good thing when you pair Crookedile with cards that take advantage of that benched damage, like Terrakion or Runerigus. Great Tusk EX. My oh my, what a beautiful, glorious, gorgeous Pokemon. 250 hit points. It's a basic Pokemon. Oh my gosh, it's a basic. That's crazy. 250 HP on a basic. You understand this thing has more hit points than Pikachu and Zekrom Tag Team GX had. And that card gave up 3 prize cards. This thing only gives up 2 and has more HP. Bedrock Breaker does 40 damage for 1 fighting energy, and you can discard a stadium card in play. And then Giganto Tusk for 3 fighting energy does 250 damage, and the Pokemon does 50 damage to itself. This card is alright. It's kind of just a fighting type beat stick. A big fighting type beat stick. And if you ever need a big basic fighting type beat stick in your deck, then Great Tusk EX may very well be your guy. You know, Great Tusk EX can get powered up by Corydon EX, though. Corydon EX is a fighting type Pokemon with 230 hit points. It's got the ability Dino Cry, which reads, once during your turn, you may attach up to 2 basic fighting energy cards from your discard pile to your basic fighting Pokemon in any way you like. And if you use this ability, your turn ends. That's obviously incredibly strong if you happen to be going first. If you're going second, it's not quite as strong. It's got the Wild Impact attack for 2 fighting and a colorless energy, does 220 damage. And just like many basic Pokemon before it that do about 220 damage, during your next turn, this Pokemon cannot attack. So, Corydon EX, we got great Tusk EX, both weak to Psychic. It's a strong ability. Dino Cry, being able to place energy anywhere you want on your board. I'm curious to see how popular fighting type decks are. I guess if lightning type decks really see an increase in play, then we're going to definitely see some fighting type decks pop up. And Corydon EX is certainly a big boost for fighting type Pokemon everywhere, being able to just get extra energy into play. We do have to worry about, of course, Gardevoir, though. Gardevoir EX, probably the strongest card from these sets, does hit both of these guys for weakness, so that's tough. Muck has 140 hit points and the Poison Sacs ability, which reads, the special condition poisoned is not removed when your opponent's Pokemon evolve or devolve. So if you're playing a funny poison deck, then Muck could very well make your funny poison deck even more funny. Toxicroak EX. Now, Toxicroak is the king of poison. So, if you like poisoning your opponent's Pokemon, Toxicroak probably going to be that Pokemon for doing so. It's got 250 HP and the Nasty Plot attack, which allows you to search your deck for up to 2 cards and put them into your hand. You know what? Nasty Plot has been printed on a lot of Pokemon cards over the years, and it always seems good. But do you know how many times I have ever used Nasty Plot in a game of Pokemon cards? In the 11 years I've been playing, 0! It's because the game is way too fast for attacks like this. Always has been. It does have the Toxic Ripper attack, though, for a darkness and 2 colorless energy, which does 120 damage, and your opponent's active Pokemon is poisoned, but you place 6 damage counters instead of 1 on that Pokemon between turns. So a potential 180 damage, and then if that Pokemon doesn't switch or heal, you're talking 240. Y'all remember Toxtricity? I'm getting big Toxtricity VMAX vibes from this card. Toxtricity VMAX, could do 240 damage if your opponent's active Pokemon was poisoned, but there was a lot required in order to get that Pokemon poisoned, and then you weren't really necessarily doing enough damage after the fact. Toxicroak kind of feels similar. You're only doing 180 damage after the poison. If your opponent switches out of it, then that's only 180 damage for 3 energy. I mean, come on. We're talking about a game where basic Pokemon, if we take a look at the basic Pokemon printed, I'm all about the chilling out of power creep, 100%, but you can't look at that card and tell me that that card's any good, right? Because at the beginning of the Sword and Shield block, this was the first card we got revealed. If you're attacking for 3 energy, you're doing 230 damage, and that was, 3 years ago. And now, on a stage 1 for 3 energy, doing 180 damage, it's just not as good. So, Toxicroak, unfortunately, is just not very good. I love this card. King Gambit has 170 hit points, a great amount of HP for a stage 2 Pokemon, and the ability Generalship, which reads, as long as this Pokemon is in play, the attacks of your basic Pokemon do 30 more damage to your opponent's active Pokemon. As I said before, in standard format, up until this point, in recent memory, stage 2 Pokemon like King Gambit have not seen play. The only stage 2 Pokemon in recent memory that have seen play are Inteleon and Decidueye. Decidueye had an ability that made it so that it couldn't be damaged by Pokemon V, which made it a successful wall strategy. so it was worth setting up. And Inteleon is a completely broken card that gets you whatever you want out of your deck when you evolve it. So Stage 2 Pokemon like this haven't really seen a lot of play. But maybe as the format starts to slow down, we'll see more supporting role Pokemon like King Gambit with their abilities that help buff your other Pokemon. So in standard formats, you can boost the damage output of your basic Pokemon. Fixing math is always good. And when combined with some other damage boosters, you might be able to hit some numbers that you couldn't previously hit. All right, I got some people in the chat talking to me about, well, what about Archeops? Bro, that doesn't even count as a stage 2 Pokemon. You realize you just plop that thing onto the... It doesn't count, all right? It doesn't count unless you're evolving twice. It doesn't count, all right? Yeah, well, what about Beedrill? Yeah, single strike, all right, mustard to get the Beedrill in play. They don't count, okay? They don't count. Archeops and Beedrill don't count. You're not evolving them into play, okay? They don't count. I'm talking about natural evolution. Don't well Archeops me, all right? There was a minute where Ludicolo did see some play. A brief minute, but then I would argue that it only was able to see play in combination with Inteleon, right? We have a card like this that exists right now. It's like literally the same thing. Your single strike Pokemon's attacks do 30 more damage to your opponent's active Pokemon. But like this card doesn't see any play. But King Gambit is cool. And you could set it up in Gym Leader Challenge format, which is, you know, when cards aren't good enough for standard format, it's always the next place to look. Gym Leader Challenge formats, King Gambit has interesting implications because you can power up Guzzlord with its Red Banquet attack to do 150 damage. And with the Muscle Band, your Guzzlord can do 170 damage. And King Gambit also has a double colorless in its attack cost. So if you're feeling frisky and you want to get in there with King Gambit, then you can easily attack with King Gambit, since both King Gambit and Guzzlord have double colorless in their attack costs. So you're already going to want to play double colorless and twin energy in your darkness type deck. So I think King Gambit has potential when paired with Guzzlord and when paired with darkness type Pokemon in Gym Leader Challenge in general. If you look at a card like Hoopa from Darkness Ablaze, which does 120 damage after King Gambit's boost with Assault Gate, that's pretty good. I do like this King Gambit for Gym Leader Challenge. I think it's got pretty interesting potential. The verdict's still out on standard format. You got to keep in mind, in standard format, there's Sableye running around, right? This card just feasts on little Pokemon. Like, you try to evolve a Pokemon into play, you're probably just going to get it Lost Mine. But there is an interesting counter to the Lost Box engine, which exists in this set, which we will be getting to shortly. All right. Let's go, baby! This card is my favorite card from Scarlet and Violet EX. Man, oh man, I didn't know that metal Pokemon had it in them like this. This thing's crazy. Revroom, 140 HP. It's got the Rumbling Engine ability, which reads, you must discard an energy from your hand in order to use this ability. Once during your turn, you may draw until you have 6 cards in your hand. Now, obviously, Revroom is going to be getting comparisons to Be Burrell in standard format. Be Burrell's Industrious Incisors ability fills your hand to 5 and doesn't have a condition. Revroom has to discard an energy from the hand and fills to 6. It's also got more HP than Be Burrell has. They both have a retreat cost of 2. So, where does Revroom fit into standard format? As a support Pokemon, I think that Revroom is explicitly worse than Be Burrell, because the whole point of setting up a Pokemon to help you draw cards is that it can draw you out of a dead hand. And the condition on Revroom makes it a card that doesn't help you draw cards. It just doesn't help you draw cards in some situations because you have to discard an energy from your hand in order to use it. So I think that if you're setting up a stage 1 Pokemon with the explicit intent of drawing extra cards, then Be Burrell is better. Let me paint this picture for you, right? Say you get Rock Sand to 2 cards and none of those cards are a basic energy, or none of those cards are an energy. Revroom can't save you from that, but Be Burrell can. If you have Ultra Ball in your opening hand, but say you only have Ultra Ball and 2 other cards in your hand, if you Ultra Ball your hand down to 0, you can't use Rumbling Engine. You can't Ultra Ball away your entire hand to go use Rumbling Engine for a draw of 6. That's really not great. When you need to get bailed out of a hand, being able to Ultra Ball the remaining cards in your hand away to go draw cards is exactly what you're going to need to do. So what I'm saying is that the energy condition on Rumbling Engine is too prohibitive in my mind to allow this card to see play over Be Burrell in standard formats. If you're making the argument that I'm going to play Revroom in a deck that I want to get energy into the discard pile with, well then why don't you play Radiant Greninja to put energy into the discard pile? Or why don't you play Ultra Ball to put energy into the discard pile? Gardevoir EX already has Curlia, which can discard energy and draw cards to get energy into the discard pile. So I don't know that the energy discarding requirement of Revroom is going to be enough to warrant the downsides of playing Revroom over other consistency engines in standard format. And I think that's fine. Because the reason why Revroom is an awesome card is not because of standard format. It's because of Gym Leader Challenge. This is the best consistency ability ever printed on a metal type Pokemon. And this is one of the reasons why Gym Leader Challenge is so fun. Because in Gym Leader Challenge format, there is more variety in the cards that see play, because a metal type deck can't just go and play Be Burrell. But in standard format, you're better off playing Be Burrell, or you're better off playing Curlia, or you're better off playing any of these other cards, and the less good cards just get weeded out instantly. But in Gym Leader Challenge format, you have to do a little bit of working with what you're given. And Metal has a lot of strengths in Gym Leader Challenge format. It's one of my favorite decks to play, but one of the few things that Metal type Pokemon did not have is adequate draw support. Do you want to see the best Metal type draw supports that we have in Gym Leader Challenge format? It's just these guys. That's it. Yeah, these are the best. You either got Dreamy Revelation Jirachi, which is the one that I play, or you've got Stellar Wish Jirachi. That's the best support that Metal type Pokemon have with abilities. And these cards really just select cards from the top of your deck. They don't actually draw you cards. So Revroom drawing cards is a game changer for Metal type Gym Leader Challenge decks. It completely, fundamentally changes Metal type Pokemon's potential. And there are a lot of implications of Revroom for Gym Leader Challenge format. First of all, you've got Mount Coronet. Mount Coronet is a stadium card from Ultra Prism, which allows you to put 2 metal energy cards from your discard pile into your hand once during your turn. With Mount Coronet, you can always make sure that you have the metal energy in your hand so that you can continue drawing cards with Revroom. We've also got Training Court. Training Court is essentially another great energy recovery card, which can allow you to continue drawing with Revroom throughout the game and could also be useful. Now, getting Metal Energy into the discard pile is a great thing because Metal-type decks have Bronzong from Phantom Forces with the Metal Link's ability, which allows you to attach Metal Energy from your discard pile to your bench Pokemon once during your turn. So Revroom combos perfectly with Bronzong, putting those Metal Energy in the discard pile so that then you can charge those energy back into play later. Revroom's going to completely change the face of Metal-type Gym Leader Challenge decks. It's going to make Bronzong better. It's going to make the whole archetype better. And I think it's going to allow different kinds of Metal-type decks see success that haven't quite seen success lately. If we think about the Magnezone that accelerates extra energy into play, one of the things holding back the Magnetic Circuit Magnezone in Gym Leader Challenge format is that Metal-type decks couldn't quite draw enough cards to fully utilize the Magnetic Circuit ability. But with Revroom, vroom vroom, baby, you can draw through your whole deck and easily power up Pokemon in play with Magnetic Circuit. I am thrilled about Revroom. It's my favorite card revealed from the Scarlet and Violet EX sets. It's the card that I'm most excited to play with in my Metal-type Gym Leader Challenge deck, which is already one of my favorite decks to play. If you want to learn more about Gym Leader Challenge format, make sure to head over to gymleaderchallenge.com and you can check out all of the getting started guides to see what's Pokemon are out there for your favorite type. Gym Leader Challenge makes set reveals so much more fun, because like otherwise we would just be like, not as good as Be Burrell. You know what I mean? Like that's just what it would be otherwise. LeChonky Chonk. Look at them pigs. That'll do, pig. Oinkalone has 260 HP and 2 attacks. Fragrance Fury for 1 colorless energy does 10 damage plus 30 more damage for each of your opponent's benched Pokemon. So if they have 5 benched Pokemon, then you're going to be doing 160 damage for 1 colorless energy. And then Heavy Stamp, 210 damage. Flip a coin if heads. This Pokemon can't attack during your next turn. Man, Pokemon loves that drawback. That's crazy. So yeah, pretty vanilla attacker, vanilla damage output. Just about as vanilla as it gets. Nothing really to write home about here. Palpad's getting reprinted, baby. It's a nice Palpad artwork. Who doesn't love Palpad? Recovering supporter cards from your discard pile and putting them back into your deck. It's great. Nest Ball also getting a reprint. If you played during the Sun and Moon era, then you know exactly how busted Nest Ball is as a card. Expect decks to play Nest Ball all the time. Yeah, because Nest Ball is just that card. It's great. It puts basic Pokemon straight from your deck onto your bench. It never goes to your hand, though, so you can't activate abilities like Lumineon V's Luminous Sign ability with Nest Ball. But it is a free-to-play item card that gets you a basic Pokemon from the deck to the bench. So a very strong card. Rock Chestplate is a tool card, no longer an item card. Notice, tool cards are no longer item cards. This is a new update with Scarlet and Violet EX. No more items. They are just tools. Got it? Good. This is going to be, fine. It's totally fine. We've got 10 years of tools that are items, and now they're all errata, but it's fine. It's fine. The fighting Pokemon that this card is attached to takes 30 less damage from attacks from your opponent's Pokemon. That's pretty sick. So, could make your fighting type Pokemon beefy. Dig that. EXP share has been around for a long, long time, and it's always been incredibly mid. And now it's probably going to continue being incredibly mid. Yep. Sorry, EXP share lovers. This card is mid. Always has been, always will be. Defiance Band is a new Pokemon tool card that reads, if you have more prize cards remaining than your opponent, the attacks of the Pokemon this card is attached to do 30 more damage to your opponent's active Pokemon. I love cards like this that play with the prize race. If you're losing, this makes it so that your Pokemon do 30 more damage. I think that this is just a great designed card and will introduce a lot of skill and decision making into the Pokemon TCG. It's a kind of spiritual successor to Solid Rage, which did the same thing, but 20 more damage instead of 30. This card was printed all the way back in 2005. So, in 2023, same thing, but does 30 more damage instead of 20 because, Pokemon, they got more HP now. Jock is a supporter card that allows you to search your deck for up to 2 evolution Pokemon and put them into your hand. I don't like supporter cards that can be easily replicated by item cards on principle. So I'll pretty much never play a Jock in my deck because you can just play Ultra Ball. Team Star Grunt is a supporter card that places an energy attached to your opponent's active Pokemon on top of their deck. I hate this. Team Star is soft. When I remove an energy from my opponent's Pokemon, I want to put it in the discard pile, all right? Back in my day, love Professor's Research. When I see people complaining that they wish Professor's Research would no longer be printed, I get life off of their tears. It's like a life-giving substance. Who cares? You know how long Discard Draw 7 has been in the Pokemon trading card game? I do not care, bro. Discard Draw 7 is something that's just part of the Pokemon trading card game. Always has been, always will be. Don't care. Get over it, okay? If you don't like Discard Draw 7, you might not like the Pokemon trading card game. That's just how it is. Penny is a new supporter card that returns one of your basic Pokemon in play and all cards attached to it. That's pretty cool. It heals your basic as a supporter card. We've seen cards like this see success previously. Sharon's Care is a great card for healing your colorless Pokemon. AZ is a supporter card that's seen play in expanded format for picking up your big Pokemon. And Acerola is a supporter card that is seen play for healing and picking up damaged Pokemon. Penny only picks up basic Pokemon, but it doesn't have any other qualifier. The Pokemon doesn't have to be damaged, and it puts all of the cards attached to it into your hand. So I think that Penny will certainly find some uses in the Pokemon TCG. Big basic decks that, wants to heal could utilize Penny. And Penny can allow you to reuse cards like Lumineon V if you want to use its Lumineon, if you want to use its Luminous Sign ability after you've already used it once. It can also remove liabilities like Lumineon V from your bench. So this is a pretty cool card, and I do expect it to see some play. This card is good, and I know it is, because this card was good way back in the day. Wow. Next, Destinies. This was right when I started playing the Pokemon trading card game. It's the same thing. Skyro Bridge makes it so your basic Pokemon had 1 colorless less retreat cost, and Beach Court does exactly that. In decks that want to be able to easily pivot single retreat Pokemon in and out of the active spots, Beach Court will be a godsend. I mean, just think about Comfeys having free retreat, or Mew from Celebrations being able to retreat for free back and forth between each other. This is a very strong stadium card for decks that want to be able to pivot Pokemon in and out of the active spot. I don't know about you guys, but I don't like this guy. Spidops EX is a grass-type Pokemon EX with 260 hit points and the ability Trap Territory, which reads your opponent's active Pokemon's retreat cost is 1 colorless more. It's got the Wire Hang attack for a grass and a colorless energy, which does 90 damage, plus 30 more damage for each energy in your opponent's active Pokemon's retreat cost. So if the defending Pokemon has a retreat cost of 2, then the Trap Territory ability makes it a retreat cost of 3, which means that your Wire Hang attack is doing 180 damage for a grass and a colorless energy. Gallarmine is rotating, so there's not a lot of great ways to increase your opponent's active Pokemon's retreat cost. And this guy doesn't have a lot of HP. I don't think that this card is very good. Extremely mid. This Growlithe has the Stoke attack, which is really good for a colorless energy. Allows you to search your deck for up to 2 basic fire energy cards and attach them to this Pokemon. Perfect for powering up Arcanine. Arcanine EX has 280 hit points and has the Terastal phenomenon, which makes it so that it doesn't take any damage from attacks while on the bench. It's got 2 attacks. Raging Claws for 2 fire energy does 30 damage plus 10 more damage for each damage counter on this Pokemon. So if your opponent happens to swing into you for 260 damage or whatever, then you're going to be able to swing back for massive numbers. Bright Flame does 250 damage, and you have to discard 2 energy from this Pokemon. Seems like a very vanilla attacker. All of these Pokemon EX that we've seen so far, pretty much outside of Gardevoir EX, have been extremely vanilla attackers. Kind of just setting the power level, I think, for things to come out of Pokemon EX. And as I said previously, I'm okay with that. I think that the Pokemon trading card game needed a huge power reset. I think that everything that's been released since Team Up, Tag Team Pokemon, Pokemon VMAX, Pokemon V-Star, have all been incredibly overpowered, and that in order for the game to get more interesting again, the power level had to be hard reset. So this is part of that, and I definitely am not complaining. This Slowbro is pretty cool. It's got 100 HP and is very similar to the original Slowbro card from the Fossil set. Slowbro from Fossil only had 60 HP and the Strange Behavior Pokemon power, which allowed you to move a damage counter from one of your Pokemon to Slowbro as often as you like during your turn, so long as you don't knock out Slowbro. This Slowbro reads as often as you like during your turn, you may move a damage counter from one of your Pokemon to this Pokemon. So no, you can't knock out Slowbro clause. So you could potentially heal 90 damage from a Pokemon every turn with Slowbro, but then in order to do it back-to-back turns, you would need to heal all of the damage from your Slowbro. I think this Slowbro could have some potential when combined with Wailord and its jumbo-sized ability. You have a Pokemon that's pretty difficult to knock out on your hands, since Slowbro can move damage counters off of your Wailord, and then something that's really cool is that you can split the damage between your Wailord and your Slowbro, and then you can heal with Rough Seas. Now, Rough Seas heals 30 damage from each of your water Pokemon in play. If you have 150 damage on your Wailord and you use Rough Seas, then you're only healing 30 damage. But if you have 150 damage on your Wailord and you move 90 of that damage to Slowbro, and then you use Rough Seas, then you're healing 60 damage, and then you can move more damage counters to Slowbro that same turn after you use Rough Seas, since you will have cleared off a few more spaces for those damage counters. Another cool trick you can do is move 9 damage counters off of a big tanky Pokemon and then play Max Potion to completely heal your Slowbro and then do it again. So this is a pretty cool card. The way to get the best use out of Slowbro in standard format would be to set up multiple Slowbro all at once. So if you have 3 Slowbro in play, then you could heal 270 damage from a Pokemon during your turn, which is a very significant amount, and then play a supporter like Cheryl and then heal all of your Slowbros and do it again. So this is actually kind of, all right, we're cooking now. Maybe if you are able to set up a big Pokemon VMAX like Corviknight or something like that and keep it from getting knocked out, maybe Slowbro could be a viable option. I do like that. I think this card is very good. Could see play in standard format and Gym Leader Challenge format. Make it very difficult to KO your big Pokemon that it's supporting. Magnezone EX with a whopping 330 hit points. Absolute insanity for a Pokemon that only gives up 2 prize cards. It's a stage 2 and has 2 attacks. Energy Crush for 1 lightning energy does 50 damage times the amount of energy attached to all of your opponent's Pokemon, and it's no mistake that they have Gardevoir EX and Magnezone EX in competing sets, right? Gardevoir EX in Scarlet EX and Magnezone EX in Violet EX. Gardevoir EX can accelerate a near infinite amount of energy into play, and Magnezone EX can't. And Magnezone EX can punish that with its Energy Crush attack. This is a very Pokemon thing for them to do. Now, how many Magnezone EX versus Gardevoir EX matchups are we ever going to see? I don't know, but they're definitely designed with each other in mind. If the opponent has 6 energy in play, Energy Crush is doing 300 damage. I mean, that's a ton of damage for just 1 basic lightning energy. If they have 4 energy in play, it's 200. Pretty decent damage output. But, of course, your opponent can play around it with some smart heads-up play, just making sure that they don't play into your Energy Crush too heavily. Pulse Launcher for 2 lightning energy does 220 damage and makes it so that Magnezone does 30 damage to itself. Pulse Launcher is great in case your opponent is trying to play around Energy Crush. You do have that solid vanilla 220 damage output to just put damage on the board. So all in all, I think this is a very strong card. 330 HP for a Pokemon that only gives up 2 prizes is nuts, okay? It's nuts. This is a big deal. And 220 damage for 2 lightning energy is very strong, as it allows you to knock out most Pokemon V for just 2 lightning energy. Of course, you are going to be hitting Lugia for weakness, but I don't really like to talk about Lugia having a lightning type weakness because it has access to Dunsparce, so it could just put Dunsparce in play and negate that weakness. But I digress. Anyways, Magnezone EX seems like a solid card. Now, Junk Hunt. Anytime you see the words junk and hunt, you got to take a look. Because one of the most powerful recovery attacks of all time was named Junk Hunt. So anytime you see Junk Hunt, got to take a look. Now, this card was from 2012. Things were different back then. The pace of the game was slower. Getting item cards from the discard pile back to your hand was a viable strategy. It also got 2 item cards from your discard pile back to your hand. And this Rotom only gets 1. But retrieving item cards is very good. And since it is a colorless attack requirement, you could play this in any kind of control deck, right? Because whenever you're talking about recovering item cards from your discard pile into your hand, you're probably up to no good, all right? You're probably trying to do something nefarious on the board. You're probably trying to lock your opponent out of winning the game and discard all their resources or something. You're probably trying to do something evil. This is probably a good card for control decks in standard format, retrieving cards like Crushing Hammer or Palpad or things like that for just one colorless energy. It's also a card that could be very good in Gym Leader Challenge, because in Gym Leader Challenge, there is the potential to build a Shock Lock control deck that utilizes Raichu with its Evo Shock ability to keep the opponent paralyzed every single turn. So with Rotom, you can continuously search out De-Evolution Spray or Scoop Up Net to reuse Raichu to keep your opponent's Pokemon paralyzed and eventually deck them out. So this little Rotom could definitely be a troublemaker. Toxtricity has got the Tear Off attack. Choose 2 cards from your opponent's hand without looking. Look at the cards, and your opponent shuffles them into their deck. Okay, more disruption. That's interesting. If you're building some sort of Zoroark control deck, you could use Phantom Transformation to transform into Toxtricity and then use Tear Off. So I think this card is just good and viable in Zoroark control decks. You can do things like Roxanne your opponent to 2 cards and then Tear Off to completely remove their hand. So yeah, this card's actually pretty decent. For 2 colorless energy, being able to remove 2 cards from your opponent's hand is certainly a good game effect for a control player. There is no difference between these Pokemon, dude. Palmot is a pretty cool Stage 2 Pokemon. It's got 130 hit points, which is low for a Stage 2 Pokemon, but its attack is very strong. Electro Paw does 230 damage, and you have to discard all energy from this Pokemon, which is fine since this little dude has got free retreat. So you can do 230 damage, you discard all the energy, then you can easily pivot it back to your bench. It's also got the ability Charge Up, which allows you to search your deck for a basic lightning energy and attach it to this Pokemon, then shuffle your deck. The power level of this card is not strong enough to be played in standard format. I'm sorry to break that to you guys. However, in Gym Leader Challenge format, this thing could see play. Miraidon EX. This card is bananas. This card is the bee's knees. This card is crazy. Absolutely crazy. It's got the Tandem Unit ability, which reads, once during your turn, you may search your deck for 2 basic lightning Pokemon and put them onto your bench, then shuffle your deck. That is just a broken ability. It doesn't end your turn, none of that. It's just straight up good. Because you can chain it. You can Tandem Unit for a lightning Pokemon and another Miraidon. And then you can Tandem Unit again for 2 other lightning Pokemon. It's just nuts. 1 Miraidon EX sets up your whole deck. It's incredibly strong. And then its attack, Photon Blaster, does 220 damage, and during your next turn, this Pokemon cannot attack. That is a very popular drawback on attacks. Even in this set review video, how many times have we seen that drawback? It's insane. So, Miraidon EX is pretty busted and is going to increase the playability of lightning-type decks. I mean, it's going to increase the consistency of cards like Magnezone EX. Being able to spam your Magnemites turn 1 is incredibly strong. This is just a very, very good card. And any deck that plays Lightning Pokemon will want to have a Miraidon EX to help set up. Banette EX. You're a little troublemaker, aren't you? 250 HP. It's got the Eternal Darkness attack. For 1 Psychic Energy, does 30 damage, and your opponent can't play item cards from their hand during their next turn. We have seen how successful item lock can be in the Pokemon trading card game lately. I mean, item lock has a long and rich history of success. You probably didn't even know that this card won a regionals. That's right, Ryan Sablehouse, back in the day. Probably didn't even know that, let alone Seismitoad EX, one of the most notorious Pokemon in the history of the Pokemon TCG. And then, of course, Vikavolt from Darkness Ablaze with the paralyzing bolt attack just won the San Diego Regional Championships and got second place at the Arlington, Texas Regional Championships. So do not ever underestimate the power of stopping your opponent from playing item cards. It is very, very good. Banette can do that with just 1 Psychic Energy. However, it is a Stage 1 Pokemon. So unlike Vikavolt, you won't be able to, just making sure that this thing couldn't evolve on the first turn before I said it. All right. You won't be able to get a turn 1 Eternal Darkness going second. But the Banette is a powerful card. Otherwise, it's got the Poltergeist attack for a Psychic and a Colorless Energy, which allows you to look at your opponent's hand, and it does 60 damage for each trainer card in your opponent's hand, which is especially good after you've been item locking for some time. Since item cards are trainer cards, you'll likely have a bunch of items there that your opponents can't play, and then you can punish them with a big Poltergeist attack. 250 HP and a nice minus 30 resistance to fighting. Banette EX could certainly be a very impactful card. You just have to wait for the right moment, the right pairing, and then Banette EX has a lot of potential. Florges, that's a very nice Florges artwork. That's nice. Look at Florges just hanging out. I love that the tree and the foliage is kind of abstracted. I think that's like a really nice touch for this card. Sorry, I'm just getting all artsy farts, you know. But the abstraction looks nice. It looks cool. Look at that. You can like, it's nice. It's a vibe, all right? It's got the ability Bloom Garden. As long as this Pokemon is in play, your opponent's there. It's got the ability Bloom Garden, which reads, as long as this Pokemon is in play, your Pokemon have no weakness. If you want to be like Lugia V-Star with Dunsparce and turn off your weakness, isn't that crazy? It's like colorless Pokemon have Dunsparce, which is a basic Pokemon that instantly turns off your colorless Pokemon's weakness. Everybody else, you got to set up a stage 2 Pokemon in order to accomplish the same thing. Life's not fair, man. It's not fair. But nobody ever said it was going to be fair. So if you want to turn off your weaknesses, Florges can do that at a cost. Getting a stage 2 Pokemon into play. Empoleon V, go ahead and chuck this thing into the trash because we've got Klefki now with the ability Prank Lock, which reads, as long as this Pokemon is your active Pokemon, each player's basic Pokemon in play have no abilities other than Prank Lock. So, the implications. Your opponent's Comfies do not work if you've got Klefki in the active spot. That's a huge deal. I don't know if you've noticed, but there are a lot of decks in the Pokemon TCG that rely on Comfy. I mean, like, a lot. It's a significant portion of the Pokemon TCG. Now, if your opponent tries to push your Klefki out of the active spot with a card like Escape Rope, you could just have a backup Klefki and promote that. And what's cool about Klefki, as opposed to a terrible card like Empoleon V, is that Klefki only gives up one prize card. So it's not this huge, gaudy liability on your board that's an absolute disaster to move in and out of the active spot. Klefki only has a retreat cost of 1, very easy to pivot in and out of the active. It only gives up 1 prize card. You can nest ball for a couple of Klefkis early, set them down, and then your opponent will have a really tough time setting up their deck if they're relying on Comfy. I love this. I think this is great. I think it's necessary for a card like this to exist in standard format because the Comfy engine with Sableye will just wreak havoc on any of these cool evolution cards that we try to set up. Since Sableye will just lost mine and knock everything out very easily, I think that Klefki is a great addition to the card pool and is going to make for some very interesting deck building decisions. Natalie, when I was playing Scarlet and Violet with my wife, Natalie, she loved Annihilate instantly. She was like, oh my God, he got so mad he died. Primeape got so mad that he died. That's literally what Annihilate is. This Annihilate is a really cool Pokemon for Gym Leader Challenge format. It has 140 hit points and 2 great attacks. Its first attack, Enraged Fist, does 70 damage for each prize card already taken by your opponent. So in Gym Leader Challenge format, since you're only trading 1 prize at a time, usually, this means that Enraged Fist is going to have multiple turns of being able to do over 200 damage, and 200 damage in Gym Leader Challenge format is a very significant amount of damage since you're going to be one-hit KOing just about everything in the format. If your opponent's only taking 2 prize cards, you're doing 140. 3 prize cards, you're doing 210. 4 prize cards, and you're up at 280. I mean, nothing is surviving a hit from this Annihilate after a couple of prize cards have been taken. I mean, really? The multiplier is so nuts that even in standard format, you're talking, if your opponent's taken 4 prize cards, 280 damage is pretty insane. And then if your opponent has taken 5 prize cards, you're doing 350 damage and one-hit KOing anything. So this card has such a high top-end potential. It has some possibility of seeing play in standard format. However, I'll preface this again. Cards like this, Stage 2 Pokemon, have by and large not seen play in standard format for years. Now, maybe the format changes and slows down to a point where you can play a 1-0-1 Annihilate line, right? Maybe it will. Back in the day, like 2004, 2005, 2006, this kind of stuff used to see play all the time. You might just play 1 Mankey and 1 Annihilate and go Rare Candy Annihilate at the end of the game to win. That's a kind of thing that used to happen. It doesn't happen anymore in standard format. You don't just play 1-0-1 Stage 2 lines. That's not a thing anymore. It used to be a thing. Not anymore. The game has fundamentally changed. It's too fast. It's too aggressive. Not really a thing that has happened in the game in any way, shape, or form lately. So I'm not just being a hater, okay? Just a reality check. These kinds of Stage 2 Pokemon don't typically see play in standard format. However, I'm hopeful that maybe standard format starts to settle down into a place where cards like this get to shine. That would make me very happy. This card has a lot of top-end damage potential. It's certainly worth thinking about. And then Dynamic Punch, 170 damage for just 2 fighting energy. Great vanilla damage output. Definitely love that. Iron Treads EX has the triple laser attack for 3 colorless energy. It does 30 damage to 3 of your opponent's Pokemon. And I know you guys are here for the history lessons. You love the history lessons. I've been playing this game way too long. There's nothing new under the sun, folks. Registeel EX from what? Dragons Exalted had the same triple laser attack. Way back when, a decade ago, 2012. And guess what? 10 years ago, this attack was bad. So it's probably still bad today. And then, I hate to say it, but yeah, that card was not good 10 years ago. And it's probably still not good now. But, you know, you never know. You don't want to, you never say never. But we might be saying never. Cybernetic Wheel for 3 metal and a colorless energy does 160 damage, and you switch this Pokemon with one of your bench Pokemon. That is a very expensive, holy moly, that is such an expensive attack to do 160 damage. I mean, Great Tusk has 250 hit points. You only have 220? I knew I got the wrong game, bro. I knew I got the wrong game, man. I wish I had Great Tusk, man. Great Tusk is way better than you. Skwovet. This card is actually interesting. 60 hit points, Skwovet. It's a basic Pokemon with the Hidey Hole ability, which reads, once during your turn, you may shuffle your hand and then put those cards on the bottom of your deck without looking at them and draw 1 card. So, why would you ever do that? Well, if you are using Be Burrell with its Industrious Incisors ability to fill your hand to 5, and your hand is clogged, then the Hidey Hole ability can allow you to put that clogged hand on the bottom of your deck and continue drawing cards. So that's kind of cool. It's like, honestly, it's like Claydol. This is generally regarded as one of the strongest Pokemon powers or abilities ever printed in the history of the game. On a stage 1 Pokemon, imagine, once during your turn, you may choose up to 2 cards from your hand, put them on the bottom. Once during your turn, you may choose up to 2 cards from your hand and put them on the bottom of your deck in any order, and then fill your hand to 6. This is probably the strongest draw ability ever. Be Burrell is a great draw card. It fills your hand to 5 cards once during your turn, but sometimes your hands can get clogged. And without Quick Ball, right, since Quick Ball is going to be rotating out of Standard, you're only going to have Ultra Ball to help really thin your hand down. So it's very possible that Be Burrell decks get their hands clogged. And Skwovet is like the anti-clog technology. It's like the Drano for your drain. You got too much hair and gunk in your drain and you need to, flush the pipes. Skwovet is going to help you get those pipes moving just right with the Hidey Hole ability. Yeah, I love this, right? I think this is cool. Will every Be Burrell deck play Skwovet? Maybe not, but it seems kind of busted, honestly. I'm into it. I think Skwovet is kind of dope. I'm not a hater. I'm going to keep my mind open to Skwovet plays. Electricity Generator got me feeling like it's the good old days all over again. Anybody who's been playing this game since the X and Y era, we know all about Max Elixir. Max Elixir won games, it lost games, it made decks possible that wouldn't have otherwise been viable whatsoever. Max Elixir was an item card that allowed you to look at the top 6 cards of your deck and attach a basic energy card you find there to a basic Pokemon on your bench. The general consensus with Max Elixir was that you needed to play at least 9 basic energy in your deck in order to hit a decent amount of your Max Elixirs. The more, the better. But decks usually would play between 9 and 12 basic energy in order to consistently hit Max Elixirs. Electricity Generator is an item card that allows you to look at the top 5 cards of your deck. But you choose up to 2 basic lightning energy cards that you find there and attach them to your benched lightning Pokemon in any way you like. Very similar to Max Elixir. Max Elixir decks had to play at least 9 basic energy, but really liked 10 or 11 in order to hit Max Elixirs consistently. Electricity Generator, you're probably going to want to be up on like the 12 to 14 energy count in order to consistently hit lightning energy. But I can already sense it that Electricity Generator decks will play like 10. Because deck lists get so greedy so fast. I already know. With a card like this, it's like, how greedy can we get, right? Because you're talking about probabilities. You're talking about percentages. So, you're trying to maximize your chances of hitting the energy off of it, because if you are consistently missing your electricity generators, then you're not really maximizing the potential of your deck. But then obviously if you have too many basic energy in your deck, then you're missing out on other tech cards that you could be playing for specific matchups. So I think that this card is very powerful. Obviously, combined with Corydon EX, you're going to be able to search your deck for basic lightning Pokemon, put them straight onto your bench, and then use Electricity Generator to accelerate energy onto them instantly. That's incredible. It's so good. You could attack with Corydon EX for 220 damage on the first turn of the game going second. That's insane. Electricity Generator has the potential to be a card that completely creates a new kind of lightning deck. It could shape the way that lightning decks are built going forward. Item-based energy acceleration is always good, pretty much always ideal, because you don't have to invest into having Pokemon on your board in order to start attacking. You can just draw into Electricity Generator, start swinging as soon as you get those energy into play. So I think that Electricity Generator, very good card, definitely going to change the way we look at lightning Pokemon going forward. Picnic Basket. This card is pretty good. It's an item card that heals 30 damage from all Pokemon in play, both yours and your opponent's. So if spread decks become a thing in standard format, then this card could be a nice counter to spread decks. If your opponent is trying to place damage counters all over your board and math you out, being able to heal 30 damage from all your Pokemon in play is super good. Usually, you won't really care if you're healing 30 damage from all of your opponent's Pokemon too, because almost everything in this format one-hit KOs each other. So who cares? Unless you're playing against a deck that is trying to, outmath you with, with spread damage, in which case this card would be pretty devastating for a spread deck to come up against. I like this card a lot. I think it definitely has some viability in both standard and Gym Leader Challenge. It's just going to be a matter of, is the meta right for it? If the meta is right for it, then it's a fine card. Katie is a new supporter card. Hello, Katie. Using this card ends your turn. Boo. But you get to shuffle your hand into your deck and draw 8 cards. These kinds of supporter cards that end your turn but draw you cards have traditionally not been played. I guess in a format where Marnie is rotated out, you could theoretically Lumineon for Katie and then fill your hand to 8. But Judge just got a nice reprint. Not a big believer in Katie. Arven is a new supporter card, allows you to search your deck for an item card and a tool card which are different things now. They used to be the same, however, now they are not. And put them into your hand. I think this supporter is mid. Miriam is a very cool supporter card. I love this supporter card. Choose up to 5 Pokemon from your discard pile, reveal them, and shuffle them into your deck, then draw 3. This is sick because it does 2 things in one. It's a recovery supporter that isn't dead in your opening hand. That's the beauty of this card, is that usually when you have cards like Brock's Grit or Clara, they're just bad in your opening hand. You don't want to see them at all. But if you have Miriam in your opening hand, then it's not so bad because you can still just use it to draw 3 cards. So I really like Miriam, and I think that it's a card that could certainly see some play in standard format, but might be a very valid option for quite a few Gym Leader Challenge decks as well, since it does have that 2-pronged functionality. And in Gym Leader Challenge format, where you're limited to only playing one of each card, except basic energy, having a single card with 2 functions is incredibly strong. Like Tate and Liza, which is a switch card and a draw card, or Cynthia and Caitlin, which is a draw card and gets you a supporter back from your discard pile. Miriam being able to shuffle 5 Pokemon into your deck and draw 3 cards is just insane. Mesa-Gosa is a new stadium card that reads, once during each player's turn, that player may flip a coin. If heads, they search their deck for a Pokemon card, reveal it, and put it into their hand. This stadium is very good. Having more ways to search out Pokemon is always strong. I mean, capturing Aroma is even starting to see some play in Lugia V-Star decks. I think that Mesa-Gosa is a card that will help boost consistency in decks that need it. It's a great option to help find your basic Pokemon and evolution cards. Unfortunately, it does help out your opponents, as they'll be able to use it to search for Pokemon out of their own deck too, but, you know, more search is always better. So I love this card. I think it might see some play in standard formats for sure to help set your deck up. Could certainly see play in Gym Leader Challenge format also. Just an all-around good card. It's like Turffield, but for everybody, except you have to flip. But it can get you basic Pokemon too. So definitely into that. There are a couple of EX battle deck type things that have been released in Japan as well. So let's go over some of the highlights from those real quick, as those cards will probably be included in our Scarlet and Violet set also. First up, we've got Lucario EX. It's got 260 hit points and the Aura Sphere attack for 2 fighting and a colorless energy. It does 160 damage, and this attack does 50 damage to one of your opponent's benched Pokemon. That, unfortunately, is a little bit underpowered. I don't think that 160 damage, 50 spread is necessarily worth it for 3 energy investment on a Pokemon that has 260 hit points. So Lucario is getting the mid tag. I absolutely love this Judge artwork that we have here. Judge getting a reprint. And Ampharos EX. 330 hit points. Look at that magnificent sheep. It's a stage 2 Pokemon that evolves from Flaffy. Of course, we've got the broken Flaffy from Evolving Skies with the Dynamotor ability, which is going to make getting energy on this thing easier than ever. Ampharos EX has 2 attacks. First attack, Elect Ball, does 60 damage, and then Lightning Tail for a lightning and 2 colorless energy does 140 damage. Plus, you can discard 2 energy from this Pokemon. If you do, it does 100 more damage. So 240 damage, pretty good Pokemon that has 330 HP. A Pokemon 240 damage is pretty good for a Pokemon that has 330 HP. The last Pokemon EX, Mimikyu EX, 190 HP, has the Void Return attack for 1 Psychic Energy, does 30 damage, and you can switch this Pokemon with one of your bench Pokemon, and Energy Burst for a Psychic, and 2 Colorless Energy, does 30 damage for each energy attached to both active Pokemon. And that is, oh yeah, Crushing Hammer reprint. Yes! That's just about a wrap on Scarlet EX and Violet EX Vitality Band reprint plus 10 damage. All in all, I'm really happy with the look of this set. It looks like they're trying to chill out the power creep of the Pokemon TCG. They're not just coming out guns a-blazing, trying to turn our game into a turn 1, turn 2 win fest. They're trying to slow the game down. They're trying to focus on the evolution mechanic, which in my mind is the heart and essence of the Pokemon trading card game. So I'm really excited to see that. A lot of these Pokemon EX are pretty, mid power level, which is okay. I think that that's something that had to happen in order for the Pokemon TCG to get the game under control and in a good space. If we look at the power level creep from Team Up through the Sword and Shield block, it really was something that took the level of the game to a kind of unreasonable point, to the point where expanded format is just kind of a chaotic mess where you have all the most broken new Pokemon with all the most broken old trainers, and it's just it's kind of haphazard right now. But I think that by resetting the power level and kind of chilling things out, allowing the ground to settle, hopefully getting ourselves a more methodical and thought out Pokemon trading card game is something that's going to be a huge win for everybody involved, especially us, the players. So I'm very excited about the cards that we've seen so far. I think that the future is bright for the Pokemon TCG, and I am even more thrilled than I was before for those Scarlet and Violet EX boxes to show up here at my studio. We're going to be opening those and building decks out of the Japanese cards that we get. Make sure to follow along on Twitter and the Discord, discord.gg/TrickyJim. And I'm Enjoyfriend, ENJOY on Twitter to stay up to date on when I'm going to be doing those openings and when I am doing the Scarlet and Violet gameplay videos and streams here on Tricky Jim. That about wraps it up. Thank you guys so much for watching. Let me know, what do you think of Scarlet EX and Violet EX in the comments below. And make sure to check out the Twitch channel, twitch.tv/TrickyJim, where I streamed this set review live. And it's actually where I'm at right now, currently. Y'all have a good one. See ya.